So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Presenters Series. IACT and IMDHA are getting geared up for the HypnoExpo this year, May 21st through the 23rd, online, so that you can enjoy it from your own home. And by the way, there are pre and post conference programs before and after that weekend, and we are interviewing the presenters of those pre and post conference programs about their programs. But just a couple little announcements. As I said, the expo is the 21st through the 23rd, and you can register for other things. You just need to go to www.hypnoexpo.com in order to do that, or to the IACT website, or to the IMDHA website, or any number of other places as well. There are two different ways that you can register for the conference. By the way, you can register for the silver package or for the gold package. The silver package is $299. We have 50 presentations for you, some number very close to that, and all of them are, of course, included along with the handouts for the presentations over the course of 3 days. And there are 3 rooms, so there's a whole lot of stuff going on at the same time, just like a live conference. There's also the gold package for $379, and that includes the lectures and the handouts, just like the other one does, but you also get on a flash drive MP3s of all of the presentations from the conference. So that's really a great deal. And then, of course, as I said, pre and post conference programs, you want to look at the websites to get the whole rundown on those, or come back next week and we'll talk about some more of them. But tonight we're going to talk about 2 of them in particular. But first, let me introduce my co-host. I'm needing to take a breath. My name is Michael Watson, by the way, if you don't know me, and my co-host Karen Han. Say hello, Karen.
Hello, Karen. How are you? Is that enough of a breath, Michael, or do you need me to chat some? Which, of course, I can do if need be.
Well, we can chat just a little bit. I just want to make sure that we also let people know about one other thing, because here we are, IACT, IMDHA, gathered together here at the same link, by the way. So you might have to type in chapter or not, but the same link. Tomorrow night is the virtual chapter, our monthly meeting, which is the second Tuesday night of every month. We are having Maria Bird on the program, and Maria Bird describes herself as a motivational witch. And I think this is just lovely because, well, it's going to be the 13th, so it's the perfect day for that. And we're really looking forward to this. She's going to talk to us about past life regressions, and we also had a little chat recently about some transformational journeys, and she takes people on hikes and does some really amazing things with them in the context of change work as well. So she's going to be a great guest. 8:30 to 10 o'clock tomorrow, same time, same station. Just click the link that you've got here, or go to the virtual chapter Facebook group where you can find the link there as well. Replays of that will be posted the next day, just as replays of these programs will also be posted tomorrow by about noon. They will be available on the IACT and the IMDHA websites. They will be available in the IACT IMDHA members forum. They will be available on the virtual chapter Facebook group. They will be available on the virtual chapter YouTube channel. So there you go. You're going to hear something, and I know you're going to hear something really good this evening. I'm looking forward to this, and you're going to want to hear it again. So it will be there for you tomorrow. One other thing, if I can just really quickly do a little plug, I hope you don't mind, but since Robert Otto is on the line here, we're having the Hypnosis Education Association, which is a Florida organization here. We have a one-day conference on June 24th, and Robert Otto is going to be our keynote speaker. Joseph Onesta will be on the bill, Paula Dowse, Lisa Mangoni, and James Tripp, who's going to talk about some really new and exciting stuff as well. That is $35 for members for a whole day of all these great presentations, and $60 for non-members. And just registering for the program also gets you a link to video replays, in fact, of all of the programs. So there's something you might be interested in. If you are, heahypnosis.com is where you will find out about that. So have I said enough, Karen?
You have. Plenty. I think we ought to get to our guest. How about it?
I think we really ought to. In fact, and the first guest that we are going to talk to tonight is none other than Melissa Tiers. And I've got to tell you, this young lady is somebody, you like me calling you a young lady, is that good, Melissa?
Smiling, aren't I?
Okay. No, seriously, I met Melissa, I don't know, somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago, something like that, probably 15 years ago now. And I've been doing NLP since the beginning of neurolinguistic programming. And I was getting a little disheartened with where it seemed to be going. And then I met this woman who just seemed to be full of all the enthusiasm that is needed to continue growing and pushing and helping people, develop the real skills of neurolinguistic programming. So I've been in love with her ever since, and I'm just so happy that she is here with us tonight. She's going to be presenting a post-conference workshop on Monday, the day after the weekend, on Practical Neuroscience, a protocol for strategic brain change, which just sounds like a wonderful thing in and of itself. I could tell you a whole lot about her. I'm going to tell you to look for this book, Integrative Hypnosis, which is just an incredible collection of stuff that she has brought together so well. And for people who are just starting, or for people who've been around for quite a long time, there's just a lot of gems in here. So one of my favorite books. She's got a couple more. I'll let her tell you about them if you want to, but I'm more interested in getting her on here so we can talk to her. So, hey, Melissa, say hello.
Hello. It's so funny, Michael, the last time we were together on one of these, I had been very sick. And so I was speaking kind of like, I was like low energy, speaking like this. And a few of the people were like, wow, it's the first time I could really like hear every word you said. And your intro prior to that, you were so fast that I feel like there's no way that I can possibly keep up with that high speed patter. So I'm just going to take it down a couple of notches here.
Hey, you're the New Yorker, sister. So you're supposed to be able to do that.
Normally, yeah. I'm actually teaching it in the middle of teaching an 8-day intensive. So I spend all day, and so you're getting me in a nice mellow mood after a bunch of ice cream.
Nice. Well, let's start out with the big word, if you don't mind, because you've been associated with this for a while. This is a phrase I've heard you say 100 times or 1,000 times, maybe. Self-directed neuroplasticity.
I thought you were going to say something else.
That's more letters than you can get on a Scrabble board. So some people don't really know what it is that you're doing. So tell us about self-directed neuroplasticity. What's up?
So self-directed neuroplasticity is kind of a system at this point that I put together, kind of cobbling together a bunch of different hypnotic techniques and NLP patterns and, rapid pattern interrupts, all designed to give the client the tools to change their own brain. So that's why it's self-directed brain change, right? It's about understanding basically the underpinnings of brain change. How do we break habituated patterns of thinking, patterns of feeling, patterns of doing, and how do we simplify it so that in the very first session with a client, you can, offer them this protocol that if that was all you gave them, they could change any habituated pattern, right? So self-directed neuroplasticity is basically that. It's neuroplasticity that is, self-directed. So it's a big part of what I do. So these days I've been describing my work in kind of 3 different sections, and self-directed neuroplasticity is really at the top. It's what I want my clients to take away the very first session. It's a bunch of different techniques. They all flow together. So it doesn't feel, it feels like an integrative system. But it's really empowering, right? So what I say to my clients when I'm teaching them this self-directed form is basically today you're going to learn to stop it. Whatever it is, whether it is the anxiety or it is the craving or the compulsive tendency or whatever the problem trance is, you're going to be able to stop it. And then by stopping it, you're going to start making new neural connections. So I have a bunch of different, very simple metaphors for how people can understand this, but it's a really empowering system because people start to look at this. I work primarily with other people's patients, OPP. Thank you, Karen. I realized maybe people wouldn't know that rap song, but yeah, OPP. So other people's patients. And so by the time they come to me, they've been, diagnosed, they have all of this stuff and this frame of, I have this disorder, there's no cure. And the the medication that's supposed to manage it doesn't work, you know? So they come into me and they might start down that path, and I say, stop. I'm not a therapist. I can't even speak in that diagnostic terminology. In my office, what you've got is a habit. And let me teach you how to change habits. You know, and so right away, we just kind of reframe it into something that is workable and changeable, because that is the truth. You know, the truth is you get habituated, and your brain creates these neuroassociative kind of clusters that are so easily triggered that it feels like it's just part of who you are. And yet we know through a bunch of different research studies and a bunch of different people's amazing work that it doesn't take long to change the brain. Even with the most hardcore OCD patients, they can look at their brains in the fMRI and see over the course of weeks how they can rewire it. So self-directed neuroplasticity is basically that part of my work that I offer to my clients.
And you say that you have it in 3 sections now. Do you want to go ahead and talk about the other 2?
Well, so I say that, but you know, many of it's all kind of rolled together, but it's just an easy way to mark it out for my students. The second layer would be utilizing a kind of different form of neuroplasticity. And that is the work we do together to kind of access the neural network of the problem, interject change, and kind of, you know, create a more strategic landing, you know, and that works with some other principles, right? So therapeutic memory reconsolidation being another way of,
That's the one I really want to get to.
Well, to me, that's the freaking game changer. That should change the whole entire field with this research coming out. It is basically what we've all been doing without really understanding it, but we've all been doing it if we've been doing this type of work. And so, you know, that's another form of neuroplasticity. And I call it another form because you can think of the self-directed neuroplasticity as kind of counteractive. You're creating these counter pathways. The old pathway might still exist, but hopefully with the use of new pathways, the old pathway gets overgrown. You know, it's like in the woods that I was telling you earlier, I got lost in. You know, whereas with therapeutic memory reconsolidation, we can literally rewrite early implicit memories and basically rewriting the emotional track of those memories. And that's what we do when we use a bunch of the techniques that everyone here knows, whether it's NLP patterns, regression to cause, re-imprinting, timeline therapy, EFT, EMDR, you name it, all of them follow these steps, you know. And so it's how to be a bit more strategic. Once you understand what's happening, then you can be so creative in how many different ways you get to do that, you know? And for me, it's about knowing ultimately where we want to go, and then knowing that there's 1,000 different ways to get there. And that I can, you know, go through everyone on this call and get a little bit about what they're doing with their clients. And I can show you how, here's where it's happening. Here's where that's happening. Here's what, so that we're all doing this, the work, you know? And one of the things that I've been harping on and on about the past few years, because I really feel like, I mean, as with every field, I guess, but in this field, you know, there's these different camps, and the camps will argue about who's got the right way, you know? And once you really start to look at what's going on under the hood, you start to recognize we're all doing the same freaking thing. See,
Good catch.
autos here. I'm being on my best behavior. And so once you kind of get that, and you realize that it doesn't matter if you're doing it this way or this way or this way or this way, we're all talking about the same neural network, and you can come at it from a bunch of different angles. So whether it's core transformations, getting the core beliefs, or whether it's the behavior, the cognitive dissonance, whether it's, you know, the initial sensitizing event, or the, you know, the
Yeah.
messed up way of cognition, we're all kind of accessing and then manipulating and interjecting change into the same neural network of the problem.
So while so many of us are looking for like the right technique, what you're really talking about is the right understanding.
Yes, yes. And then you realize that you already have the right technique, right? And now it's about what's the right technique for that individual. So in my classes, as you know, I like toys. I like shiny toys. I go to classes and conferences all the time so I can pick up a little shiny toy and play with it and take it apart and put it back together and glue it to something else and see what I can do with it. So we like techniques. It creates dopamine in the session, which is something you always want, novelty. And so for me, it's about having all these different techniques in your back pocket so that you can be present with what's happening in front of you, knowing that, you know, in any given moment, oh, here or here or here. And pretty soon it gets to the point where from an objective look, it just looks like you're having an interesting conversation. So that's the thing about the techniques. You know, you embody them at a certain point. So that maybe like I'll have an astute student who'll say, oh, I really liked how you did this and this and this and this and this. And another student who someone new will say, what? She was just talking. Right? But so the techniques are for the client, right? It's like, oh, you want to stop this? Here's this quick little rapid thing, 30 seconds, you stop anxiety. And then they're like, wow, empowered by that. Oh, here's another one. You want to stop internal dialogue? Do this, you know, boom, done. But, you know, they like to have that something tangible, something that they can understand. But really for the practitioners, we're all doing the same thing. I mean, if you have the basic understanding. So if you understand that there's many different ways to activate the neural network, there's many different ways to create the prediction error, or, you know, throw a wrench into the system, and then, you know, direct the landing. And once you kind of get that, and, you know, for a lot of NLP, it's kind of written into the process, but it's better when you have an actual understanding of it, because then you create your own. And then it is just like co-creation at its best, because you're co-creating the change work with your client. And you don't have to be the one responsible for the change. It's a dance. And that's what I really like about it. So the third level, Karen, I'm looking at you. I see it. So the third level is, you know, is change through insight and clarity and understanding. It's about the deeper meaning underneath it all, right? So I don't want people to think that I'm just giving techniques for this like rapid, superficial kind of change, because that kind of change will still trickle down and create neural change. But we're human and we want to know why. You know, we like the meaning. We like to understand things. Why was I doing this? Why couldn't I do this? So the third level is really about that. It's about insight and creating new narratives, you know, new stories that we live by. And so that's in a nutshell. I mean, yeah, there's a bunch more stuff, but we can really take most of the things that I do and put them into these three kind of categories, you know. Either we're arming the client to change their own brain, or we're working together to change the implicit early memories or the explicit newer semantic memories and episodic memories and autobiographical memories, giving them, you know, a new narrative via reframing and things like that. Or we're looking for the deeper understanding. And it creates for a more, you know, solid change.
Is that deeper understanding what you mean by embodied cognition?
Not really. Embodied cognition, it means a few different things to a few, to depending on who's looking at it and who's talking about it. For me, embodied cognition plays into a lot of what I do, in that I am aware of the importance of the body in cognition, of the nervous system in general, not just the brain. People think when I'm talking about, this just brain change, that it's all in here. It's not. It's the whole nervous system. And embodied cognition is ways of utilizing, the feedback from the system, the body. And this kind of segues into priming. And I know that you've heard me talk about priming before, because it's a big part of what we do, and how I work, and how do we set a certain tone, especially now in this virtual world where it's not as easy as priming your office, where people come in and they sit in a softer chair, because research indicates their mind is a bit more malleable and easier to change than if they're sitting in a hard chair. That is embodied cognition. These are the metaphors that we live by, that if you want to, for example, have someone sign a petition and you want them to take it more seriously, then you put it on a very heavy clipboard. Because by holding the heavy clipboard, it lends weight to the topic. This is embodied metaphors. This is why you've heard me talk about how, holding a warm cup of coffee will have you rate an individual to be warmer. And, I use that example a lot because people can get it. They understand that this goes way back to the very first primes, the foundational sensory experience. A baby is born, and right away, warmth is associated with all good things. Nursing, being cuddled, being held, being loved, and cold is the opposite. And so if you look at that as a great example of how neural networks grow on scaffolding, early scaffolding, so that even now, as adults, we can say things like, I'm warming up to this idea, or what a warm-hearted person, or what a cold, yeah, don't give me the cold shoulder, leave me out in the cold, like we have these, but those are easy ones to point to. And yet almost every idea construct, every word has these foundational primes. And so it's embodied, that they know that if you do this, you can literally, wipe your hands of things, that people that do this are less likely to help out a volunteer. They're like wiping their hands of the situation. I mean, they've done, if a judge is hungry, they have harsher sentencing. So they'll deny that, but the body is influencing cognition, and it always is. They've done interesting research where, they put people, they have them cross a rickety bridge so that their heart is pumping. And then they have like a volunteer, try and get them to do a survey. And the people that went over that rickety bridge will call that girl because they'll think they're attracted to her. Because what the body is feeling in that state, they're looking for a cognitive reason. And so they'll attribute it to something else. The brain doesn't like uncertainty, and it will create any narrative just to get out of that feeling of discomfort. And so that too is embodied cognition. It's a way that the body influences the mind. And there's so many great books where you can read these little dollops of research that become great little teaching metaphors. I know that you guys are amazing trainers. So, for me, that's all of my therapeutic metaphors are basically research-based. I always joke that instead of, using therapeutic story that start with, once upon a time, my once upon a time is typically, so they did this study. Because people lean in. And if there's one way that we are used to or rather it's acceptable, culturally acceptable to change your mind, it's with new evidence, right?
Yeah.
And so it gives us something to hang the change on. And quite often in my work, I use these little bullet metaphors of neuroscience to give people something to hang the change on, you know, to get conscious buy-in, which I feel doesn't get enough play in our field. You know, you don't get conscious buy-in. You are pushing up against a boulder you don't have to push up against. And so for me, it's all about getting that that cohesive narrative that people can walk away with. Anyway, so that's kind of a little dose of embodied cognition and why I love it so much, because it influences everything we do. How people are listening to us, how we're speaking, our facial expressions, our body, how we're breathing is all affecting the nervous system of our clients and ourselves. We're being affected by millions of bits of information internally and externally that the more we can start to become aware of, the more we can utilize and you know, and stack the deck in our clients' favor.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I just want to mention for the benefit of people that are listening, you were talking about priming for change, and embodied cognition. We're talking about sort of two things together here, but the priming part of it, I noticed that you have a 45-minute program on Sunday also called just priming in practice. So just so everybody knows, hey, Sunday morning, first thing, in fact, like 9 o'clock, I think.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, people should be in church at that time. Yeah. So anyway, pardon the interruption. And I'll tell you, I was reading the description of your workshop, and a phrase that stood out to me, just because I think so many people will catch on to this as being something they really want. The phrase was neutralizing triggers conversationally, which is something that I think Roy Rogers really would have appreciated. and so these are some more of the techniques, right, that are included in your thing. Conversational stuff is really huge, and really
so
want.
So much of my work is that these days, honestly, for the past few years, in my world, most of the real work is happening in a real dynamic conversational form. And, you know, it's an approach that is exciting because to reach a certain level of let's say mastery is always, you know, always at the top of Squaw Peak, and I am nowhere near it. So it keeps me in this field, you know, it keeps me excited about it. And that's, you know, one of the biggest things about even understanding the basics of neuroscience as it relates to what we do is to know how the brain pays attention. You know, how do we cultivate learning, integration, attention, awareness, change? All of these are things that are vital, and dopamine has to flow. And that means dopamine not just in your client, but in yourself. And I always say this in my classes, we all know what it's like to take a lecture, you know, typically in school, from a teacher that's bored with their content already. Like, it's torturous. It's almost impossible for me to sit through.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have the excitement and the curiosity and the dopamine flowing in your own self, you know, then you're really, you know, fighting with both hands behind your back, you know. And to me, it's about engaging and novelty and curiosity. And so the conversational change means that I'm having a conversation where I am all in. You know, I am absolutely riveted to my client because what can I learn here? What can I notice? How are they breathing? What's changing? What's not changing? You know, and so, and clients, they engage, they feel that, you don't do this and the client's like over here. You can't stand outside of trance and do this work. You got to be in it, Anyway, sorry, I went off on a little loop. It's been a long, I'm in the middle of an 8-day intensive, so I'm a little
intense.
The ice cream is just starting to hit.
We're entranced no matter what, Melissa. So you keep talking.
And I've got to tell you, Melissa, you're always so far ahead of the rest of the pack that so I'm looking at your notes, at the notes that I have here to talk with you, and I see phrases here, and I'm wondering, have we already talked about that? So the next thing that I'm looking at is vagal awareness. What can you tell us about that? What is that?
Right. So it's the same thing about understanding the nervous system, and this comes from polyvagal theory and just having an awareness of what that is and how our nervous systems are communicating through many different ways. And, once you understand that, you start to, as I said, stack the deck, for the client. So if you imagine, I don't have too much time, but most people can look at Stephen Porges, who wrote Polyvagal Theory, and he's got a few more books, but right now it's hot. It's a hot topic because a lot of research is being done on down-regulating the vagus nerve. So it's a nerve that goes from the brain. It actually has two different major branches, and from the brain through all the organs and back again. And it's basically the feedback system. It is in charge of fight or flight, rest and digest. That is the highway that carries the information. We used to think it was top down, that it was the brain telling the body what to do. But we actually know that there's 10 times more nerves flowing up into the brain from the body. So one of the things, there's a lot that you don't need to even attend to as a practitioner of the mind. But what you should understand is that one of the branches of the vagus nerve is in the face and in the ears and in the jaw, and that people are listening and seeing things that are going to trigger their nervous system, and you should be aware of it, right? So I always say, imagine that your nervous system is asking the same question over and over and over again, countless times a minute. And that question is, am I safe? Your nervous system is saying, am I safe? Am I safe? Right? That's what we have evolved to do. And what tells the nervous system that it's unsafe is certain tells, right? Like a flat affect. When you see someone without any facial expression, that immediately puts your nervous system on high alert. We've evolved, we're herd animals. And when one of our herd is not right in the head, they're dangerous. And so we've evolved to notice that. When someone loses prosody, musicality, or intonation in their voice, and they speak in that flat, no affect monotone, that triggers the nervous system. So people don't know cognitively what's happening, but their body is being triggered. People will just say, I just don't feel right. This person's just off. That's their nervous system. And so once you kind of start to get that, and you start to get that, the more you can relax yourself, the more you can tap into what is naturally a congruent way for you to speak. The old, like, what scares me when you think about like the old Freudian psychoanalysts who were taught not to show any facial expression and to keep their voices as flat as possible so they wouldn't be leading. And yet, no wonder people were digging themselves in some psychoanalytic hell. They were just there on the couch going, their nervous system was freaking. Many different ways that we can begin to, to utilize this information in not just in the output, but in the input. You can start to see when someone is going into a kind of vagal shutdown, or, you know, and then there's different ways of approaching it. You know, how do we get someone to downregulate rapidly? And so part of my self-directed neuroplasticity, just to come full circle, is different ways of rapidly downregulating their own nervous system. So they put their vagus nerve into, you know, at ease. Let's put it that way, because people like me that live in the city, you know, there's always going to be this low grumbling noise. Maybe not so much now that I'm no longer in the heart of Manhattan, but you know, that triggers the nervous system. Now, at a certain point, we do get desensitized to it. And that's why some people would come to New York to come to my trainings, and they're like, how can you live here? They just walk into the like, what? Because, you know, they walk through Times Square, you know, and yet a New Yorker's like, meh. So we can desensitize to the external and typically unconscious triggering, but anyway, so that's a little snippet. There's no way I can do it justice, because Peter has his whole thing coming on.
And in a couple of minutes, we're going to get to Peter. But before we do, because I had the same talking points that Michael does, and the one that fascinates me the most from you is the elephant in the room.
So I already kind of touched on how, you know, in my talks these days, I try to point out how all the different camps are, you know, that have been arguing that they have the best way. And I liken it to that story, you know, of the blind men, you know, arguing over what an elephant is like, because they have this, you know, they're touching different parts of it. And I feel like that's what we've all been doing. You know, we've been arguing, no, you've got to regress to cause and get the, you know, initial sense of, no, you've got to do that. It's the same fucking elephant. Damn it.
And I thought that was the elephant in the room. So we got to it after all.
You know, so that was one way. I mean, I could always spin a yarn about other elephants in the room, but that was the one I was referring to, is that, you know, it's, and Steve Andreas, I got to say this, and in the back of his book, do you remember Six Blind Elephants? Well, he says, he uses that, and he says, what is it? Six blind elephants were arguing over what man was like. And one touched him and said, man is flat. I probably just butchered that. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, lovely. Lovely. All right. Well, this is going to be exciting, everybody. So look, the post-conference Practical Neuroscience, a protocol for strategic brain change, is one day Monday, as a matter of fact, on May 24th, at the end of the...
You know, I put it together in a nice cohesive package, really, so that it's a protocol that you can just adapt to fit the client and kind of use for everything. When you get the basics of it, it just, you know, it just ups your game.
All right. So thank you, Melissa. We really,
Yes, very much.
we really loved it, and wish we had a little more time with you, but such as life.
You have to come to the conference. That's all.
Have to come to the conference. That's exactly right. So, so thanks a lot. Everybody's applauding, even though the microphones are muted. But
Thank you, everybody. I have to ditch because I got to get up from the screen. I think 10 hours is probably too much.
Every year you leave me, Melissa. Thanks.
I am not. You know what? I'm staying.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop. I just officially thank you very much. We appreciate it, and have a good evening.